Hey there, welcome back. This is Professor Hank, and in this video I'm going to start a series where we talk about functions in the Python programming language. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. In this first video we're going to go over void functions, what those are and how to write them, and then we're going to talk about function calls, what those are and how to write them. And functions in a programming language allow us to support modularization. That is to say that we're able to take a more complex program and break it down into separate, smaller pieces. And this supports the divide and conquer approach to programming. Okay, so how do we create a function in Python? Well, we're going to need to have 4 parts to create our function, right? And we're going to need to have a new keyword, the def keyword, and we're going to need to name our function. We're going to have a parameter list, and we're going to have the block of code that's going to execute whenever we call this function by name, right? And that block of code is also known as a function body. Okay, so here's the syntax for a function. We're going to have that def keyword at the very beginning on a line, and then we're going to have the name of the function following that, separated by a space, and that name is subject to the normal rules of identifiers within the language. Right? Then we're going to have an opening and closing parentheses, which is the parameter list, and for this first video we'll go with an empty parameter list. We'll expand on that later. Then we're going to follow those parentheses with a colon, right? And the colon is going to indicate that there's going to be some statements that follow afterwards, right? So the next statement or group of statements, block of statements, is going to be indented, and these are going to be the statements that are part of the function body. Okay, so let's talk about the function call. So the function call is the statement that we have in a Python program that is going to cause the function to execute, right? And the function call is going to be made up of the name of the function that we want to call. In this case, let's assume that we have a function named spam, and then we're going to have these opening and closing parentheses immediately following it, right? So got to have those parentheses to indicate that it is in fact a function that we're trying to use, right? Because without those parentheses, all we have is essentially a variable name, right? So we have to have those parentheses to indicate that it is in fact a function. Later on, we'll put variables inside these parentheses to pass arguments to the function. Okay, so what's a void function? A void function is a function that's just going to execute some statements, right? One after the other. So what does this mean? Right? Well, it means that it's not going to return a value, right? And we'll go into what returning a value means in a later video. But essentially what it means is we're just going to execute some statements, and there's not going to be any data that comes out of the function that we can use later on in our program. Okay, so let's take a look at a quick example of a void function, right? So I'll create a void function that is just going to display hello world on the screen, right? So the function definition is going to have to begin with the def keyword, and then I'm going to need a name for the function, and I'll call the function hello world, right? So I've got the def keyword, the name of the function. I'm going to have my parameter list, which in this case is going to be empty, more on that later, followed by a colon, and then indented, I'm going to have a body of statements, also known as the function body, right? So for this particular function, all it's going to do is say hello, and then it's going to say world on 2 separate lines. Okay, so this is going to be my function definition. Okay, now these 2 statements right here is the block of code that's going to be executed whenever I call this function, and this top line here that has the def keyword, the name, the parameter list, the colon, that's known as the function header. Okay, so how do I execute the code that belongs to that function? Well, I'm going to have to do that by making what's known as a function call. And the function call consists of the name of the function and parentheses, right? And this is where later on we'll learn that we can pass arguments to the function. But right now, I don't have any data I want to get into the function, so nothing goes inside of those parentheses. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run it. And you can see that hello world appears on the screen. Now I can call this function as many times as I want, right? So rather than rewriting print hello and print world over and over again, I can just make the function call, right? You can see that those statements are going to execute time and time and time again, right? Now let's walk through this, but let me add a couple of more statements, just some print statements where I say before and I say after. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. The program's going to start executing with this first statement right here, right? The function definition is just a definition, and it's going to tell the interpreter, hey, there's this function that I have called hello world, and whenever I call it, I want you to execute the statements that belong to that function definition. Okay, but this is actually going to be the first statement that executes. Okay, this is the very first one. There's no def keyword here, so this is the first statement that's going to execute. So what's going to happen is we're going to have this guy run, and we're going to see before on the screen, and then we're going to execute hello world, right? The function call is going to happen. And when that happens, we leave and go up to the function definition, and we start executing each statement, one after the other, right? And once we've run out of statements to execute from the function definition, we go back from where we came, and then we execute the next statement and finish off the rest of our program. Okay, so let's see that happen. Let's see a run of that. So you can see here, there's the before, right? Corresponds to that statement right there. Then we had our function call, and we went up and started executing statements in the function. So there was the hello, there was the world corresponding to these two statements right here. And then once those were finished, we came back from whence we came and then continued on with the rest of the program. So then we saw the after over here. Okay, now we can have as many functions as we need. So let me give you another void function here. And I'll call this one goodbye world, right? And all we'll do is we'll just say goodbye world. Okay, now you can put in this block of code any statements that you want to have execute time and time and time again, right? So let me go ahead and call my goodbye world function now. Oops, goodbye world. Okay, and go ahead and run it to see what's going to happen, right? So there's the output, and just like before, we print before, right? And then we make our function call. So we leave this location in our program, we go up to the function definition, start executing statements. So there's the hello, and then we move to print world. There's the world output. Then we come back from whence we came, continue on with the program. We see the after on the screen, and then we went on to our next function call, goodbye world. So when we did that, we left the function call and went to the function definition. So we printed goodbye, see that on the screen. And then we print world and see that on the screen. Okay, so that's what it looks like to write a couple of void functions, and that's what the function calls look like. And I think that's everything that I want to do in this video right here. So what did we cover? Covered what a function is. We covered how to define a function, what the necessary parts are. We're going to have that def keyword. We're going to have the name of a function, we're going to have a parameter list, and we're going to have some statements that we want to execute whenever we call the function, and then we went over what the function calls look like. Okay, so that's going to bring this video to a close. If you felt that the video was useful, please consider giving the video a thumbs up, and if you thought that the video sucked, well then you've got that thumbs down button as an option as well. If you'd like to see more videos, if you're interested in more content from the channel, feel free to hit that subscribe button. And as usual, if you're a student of mine and you have further questions, feel free to drop me an email or to stop by my office hours. Okay, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.